Good Good morning. Okay. I'm going to hold it way back then. Good morning. Okay. So today what I want to do is talk about leading up into the Middle Ages. Next week we'll finish with the Middle Ages and not in 2 weeks. Middle Ages and early modern period, and then from then on we'll start to move around the world and look at specific Jewish communities in various countries, the Jews of Argentina, the Jews of France, the Jews of Norway, we'll take different countries and we'll take Germany, yeah, sure, absolutely. And we'll take a look at various communities in different countries throughout the world. So, as we talked last week about Jews within the Roman Empire and Jews who were living in Rome. The Roman Empire extends until 410, when the Visigoths, which are a Germanic tribe, defeats Rome. So, if that's the year 0, in 410, Rome is sacked by the Visigoths, who were, as I said, of Germanic origin, and they were located mostly in Eastern Europe. And once the Visigoths sack Rome, they then control large parts of the Roman Empire, including southwestern Gaul. And basically, Gaul is France. It includes Belgium and some Switzerland, and but basically, you can think of Gaul as France. The Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, and they hold that territory until 711, when the Arabs and the Berbers come in and they conquer those territories. In Spain, in 506, all the Jews become Roman citizens, and they have to live under Roman law. In 612, the next ruler who comes in revokes that decree, and then there is discrimination and forced conversion. At this time, remember that Jews are all around the ancient world. We have Jews all through Southern Europe. We have Jews in what we now call the Middle East, Jews in Northern Africa. Remember, you had Alexandria here in Egypt. That was a huge Jewish population center. Jews in Baghdad and all throughout the Middle East and all throughout Southern Europe especially. And at these times, Jews were engaged in agricultural pursuits mostly, and small amounts of trade and crafts. In Italy and Greece, they had a monopoly on silk weaving and dyeing of fabrics. Some worked as translators or interpreters. In Germany, they worked as importers of goods. There was no proselytizing. So one of the things that we think about for Jews today is that we don't go door to door, right? And we don't ring the doorbell and say, "Hi, would you like to be Jewish? Would you like to hear the word of the Hebrew Bible?" We don't do that. But we did, absolutely we did. In the first century we did, for sure. Okay? So how did Jesus amassed his congregation, Jews went around and they talked to non-Jews, and they said, hey, you want to become Jewish? We have this great religion here, and this is what it's about. What do you think about that? And so we absolutely did proselytize for a long time. And as I pointed out last week, if you were a Jew in the ancient world, you were a member of a large religious group. And in fact, some of the Greek historians say that wherever you go in the ancient world, you find Jews. And so Judaism was a very large religion in the ancient world. It wasn't the tiny, tiny, tiny little piece of the population that we are today. And remember also that Christianity had not yet come onto the scene. So we didn't have lots of competition. You could be pagan, you could be Jewish, some kind of pagan or Jewish. And so it isn't until the rise of Christianity after 300 CE that Christianity begins to take over, certainly Europe. And then the rise of Islam later on in 600 CE, when it takes over what we now call the Middle East, Northern Africa, and Spain. All right. Everywhere in Christian Europe, there were attempts to convert Jews. And so, just as a reminder, the year 300 here is Constantine, who is the emperor of the Roman Empire. Constantine himself converts to Christianity. He has a vision along the road, and he converts to Christianity. And then his successor, Theodosius I, converts the entire Roman empire to a Christian empire. All right, and of course, Jewish populations were persecuted and forced to convert. Now, let's talk about forced conversion for a second, because it's going to come up all throughout our history. What are the three, if I can use Christian terminology, what are the three cardinal sins of Judaism? The three worst things? Say again? Murder. Incest, incest and adultery. Beautiful. And idol worship. Those are the three worst sins in Judaism. Murder, incest and adultery, and idolatry. All right. So in terms of forced conversion, if you are required to worship an other god, is that not idolatry? Sure, it is. If you are forced to commit incest or adultery, and you say, well, how could that possibly be, Rabbi? Forced to do that? Well, it was something the Nazis did. The Nazis said, sleep with so-and-so or we kill you. Yes, this happened. And of course, murder. You have to kill so-and-so or we'll kill you. And the Nazis did that too, absolutely. Put a father and son in a room and said, one of you has to kill the other or we kill the one who doesn't. It's just, can't even imagine. Yes, Joelle.
But isn't it true that those are the three things that you're supposed to say no to and allow yourself to be killed by whoever is forcing you?
Good. That's exactly where I was going. Absolutely. So the question then becomes, what are the three things for which dying al Kiddush Hashem, for the honor of God, for the sanctification of God, is okay. And those are the three things. If you are told you have to kill somebody, better you be killed. Better you allow yourself to be killed. If you are told to worship other idols or other gods, better you should be killed. Okay, so we know that throughout our history, so many of our people at various points during our history, and we'll talk about that next week when we get to the Crusades and things like that. 2 weeks, sorry. In 2 weeks. Yes, I got it. I'll probably say next week again several times, but know that I get it. It's 2 weeks. I won't show up next week, I promise. That many Jews over the course of history elected either to commit suicide or allow themselves to be killed rather than commit one of these three terrible sins in Judaism. And so everywhere at this time in Europe, there were attempts to convert. There were forced conversions. In some places, Jews lived relatively peacefully. In other places, they didn't. So we can't say, oh, during the early Middle Ages, Jews... We can't make blanket statements like that because it depends exactly on the region, the country, who was ruling, these kinds of things. As we move through history, the next major event that happens is in 600. Now, it's not exactly 600, it's actually 632. But 600 is really easy to remember. Okay? 600 is when Muhammad is born. Okay, so Muhammad is born, and after he is born, he lives for about 30 years. Yeah. Yep. He dies very young. And what happens then is that there is a vacuum when he dies in Islam. And he didn't leave any children. So who was going to succeed him? And so the power struggle became intense. And what we have following Muhammad's death are four what are called the rightly minded caliphs. And they are mostly related to Muhammad in some way, father-in-law, cousin, these kinds of things. And during the reign of these four rightly minded caliphs, Islam moves through the ancient world like wildfire. So in the same way that Christianity moved through Europe after 300, Islam moves through what we now call the Middle East and Spain and Portugal and Northern Africa after 600. Okay, what does this mean for Jews? It's huge, right? Because we had Jewish cities, Jewish communities, I mean. We had Jewish communities, large and small, all throughout Europe and all throughout the Middle East, what we now call the Middle East, all throughout Northern Africa, and all throughout Spain and France. So in one fell swoop, after Muhammad, Jews find themselves now living in a completely new reality. Half the Jews are living under Christian rulers, and half the Jews are living under Muslim rulers. Okay. These communities had two very, very different experiences. Jews living under Christianity, by and large, were much less tolerated, were more persecuted, were more forced to convert, and had a much more difficult time living under Christianity. Jews living under Islam were tolerated. Islam enacted what's called the Pact of Umar, and the Pact of Umar set rules for Jewish communities. Jews under Islam were called dhimmis. Dhimmis, dhimmis. And a dhimmi means a protected person. So originally, Muhammad was respectful towards Jews. Why? Because we were, in his words, a people of the book. We had an existent written tradition that was already established. Christians as well, although Muhammad was a little bit more suspect of Christianity, because you'll recall at this time in history there's no Protestantism. This is all Catholic of some kind, and so the idea of the Trinity, the idea of saints, the idea of all these things was problematic for Muhammad, but ultimately said, look, you guys have a tradition too, it's okay. And so originally, Muhammad was respectful. And he said, look, Jews, just go ahead and live your lives, everything's fine. Just keep to yourselves a little bit. We're going to talk about that a little more in a second. It isn't until sort of early after that Muhammad, because his original intention was, okay, I'm just going to back off the Jews. And they're going to see pretty quickly that this new tradition called Islam, submission to God, is really great. And they're all going to convert and everything's going to come over and I don't have to deal with it so much. It's all going to work out. Not so much, right? So Muhammad goes to the Jewish communities and he says, hey, I've got this great new religion and this is what it's about. And by the way, here are some of our stories. And the elders, the people of knowledge within the Jewish community, looked at Muhammad and said, no, that's not the story. Ishmael was not brought up to Mount Moriah and almost sacrificed by Abraham. No, that was Isaac. No, it was Ishmael. No, it was Isaac. No, it was Ishmael. And all kinds of stories and traditions like this, Muhammad brought with a Muslim slant, and the Jewish community said, oh, no, that's not how it was. That's not how it is. That's not the story. That's not okay. That's not good. And then Muhammad was not so happy with the Jews. And he became less happy as time went on. And then he was very much antagonistic and opposed too. And so that's the first time that we get tension between Jews and Muslims. It's later, mid and late Muhammad's life, when the Jews won't convert. Now, the same thing happens right in Christian Europe, in the sense that, which had happened much earlier, Christians went to Jews and said, when are you going to accept that Jesus is Messiah? When are you going to accept that Jesus is God? And the Jews were, never, never, not going to happen, not in my lifetime. And that made them very angry. Why can't you just accept it? Well, because it's not true, and it's not true for us, and it never will be true, and it's not okay. So that led to, as you know, great animosity, great problems. All right. So we have, we have the four rightly minded caliphs who take over after Muhammad's death. Now, as an aside, sort of common knowledge for all of us, because it's really important that we should know, we have two major branches of Islam today in our world, right? They are what? Sunni and Shia. Very good. Can you tell me what the difference is between them? Okay, pretty close, pretty close. Good, very good. So I'm going to repeat it right. She said basically one has a connection to a lineage of Muhammad and the other is more general, okay? And that's pretty darn close. So 90% of the Muslim world are Sunni Muslims. 10% are Shia Muslims. Basically, we find the Shiites in Iran and Iraq. Everywhere else, basically, is Sunni. And that's really important for us to know. When we look at the news at night, or when we hear, you know, Sunni, Shia, and now we understand. Okay, the Shia, for the Shia, they believe that the leader must be in a direct lineage to Muhammad in some way. So Ayatollah Khomeini and current Ayatollahs trace their lineage back to, way back to Muhammad in some fashion. Sunnis, that's not a requirement. For Sunni, it's basically an elected position by the elders, shall we say. Okay? So, what happens then is that for Shia, so for instance, the first rightly minded caliph after Muhammad dies is his father-in-law. His father-in-law, no blood relation to him at all. So for Shiites, not okay. That first rightly minded caliph, no good. We don't recognize that. The second rightly minded caliph, Omar, is his cousin. Okay, so we have blood relation there. And so for Shia, the rightly minded caliphs start with Omar. They don't start with the first rightly minded caliph. Anyway, it's a matter of succession, and it has caused, as you are well aware, enormous tension in the Muslim world. Okay, so Jews are living in the Muslim world, and they are living under two systems of Islam, Shia and Sunni, and they find themselves in a very different position from Jews of living in Christian Europe. As we just said, we all know Jews living in Christian Europe were persecuted. They were held down during the early Middle Ages, especially, which we call the Dark Ages, early Middle Ages, Dark Ages. Then we have the late Middle Ages, which you might know as the Renaissance, basically, and then the early modern period following right in there at the same time. Okay. The Jewish communities in Europe were restricted from many of the worker guilds. They were restricted from participating in business in general. What were they allowed to do? Money lending, very good. So you know this, very good. Money lending. For Jews who were able to. I mean, there were, it's not like every Jew in the Middle Ages was wealthy enough to lend money. But Jews who were, did. Why were Jews allowed to lend money but not work in other fields? Interest. Tell me about that.
They could make a
And why couldn't anyone else? Why weren't they? That's true, yes. Almost. Very close. You're both right there. Chris, okay, so why can't Jews lend money to other Jews and charge interest? Thank you. Yep. Because it says in our tradition you can't. Okay, Jews are forbidden to charge interest from other Jews. Okay, so now the question then becomes, well, how come Christians can't charge interest from other Christians? It's not in their tradition, or is it? Usury, okay. Well, it is in their tradition in the sense that our tradition is part of their tradition. Our tradition says Jews can't charge interest from other Jews. And here's the little way in. What Christians thought of themselves as the new Israel. The Christian covenant that Jesus brought to the world, in Christian eyes, replaced the Jewish covenant. So for Christians at this time in history, the Jewish covenant that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai was no longer in force. Christianity said, okay, God is done with that agreement. He made a new agreement now, and he sent Jesus to bring us that new agreement. And that new agreement is you just have to have faith in Jesus as Messiah, and you are allowed to get to heaven. Okay, so because they saw themselves as the new Israel, the replacement of Israel as God's favorite people, then they have to abide by the same laws that we had to in terms of ethical commandments, not religious commandments, right? Peter, what do you think? What do you have that look like? I don't know about that, Rabbi. Right. Very good. So the point made is that that there are many Christian communities now who believe that the Christian covenant does still, in fact, replace the Jewish covenant, and in fact, the Christian covenant was much easier because it didn't include so many commandments, right? Okay, and yes, that is certainly mostly true, I would say, partly true. We know that Catholicism changed, right? In Nostra Aetate in 1965, the Pope declared that the Jews have their agreement with God, and we have our agreement with God, and our agreement doesn't replace their agreement. Our agreement is for us, their agreement is for them. That was huge. That was huge. And in Nostra Aetate as well, the Pope declares the Jews are not the killers of Jesus. They are not the ones who killed Jesus. So the charge of deicide was no longer applicable to the largest group of Christians. Yes.
Story in the gospel, I don't know if this is related to what you're saying about usury, but Jesus did chase out all the money changers from the temple. So the Christians could, tap into that story regarding money laundering.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And so the idea of Christians now being the new Israel, they couldn't charge interest from other Christians because Jews couldn't charge interest from other Jews. But, as you all correctly pointed out, whom could Jews charge interest from? Christians. So the Jews became very, very useful to the feudal nobility in Europe at the time. The barons, the various lords would have their Jews as their accountant and tax collector, right? And they would go around the fiefdom and collect taxes from other Christians, and they could, in fact, charge interest. Okay, so that was very useful to the nobility. But it also, as you might expect, created huge amounts of animosity towards Jews. No one likes the IRS at their door, right? And Jews were basically the IRS. And so the average person, oh, those Jews, they're just coming for my money again. They just make money off of our money. Okay. So it created great hostility. And this was sort of the dynamic through the Middle Ages. And it become, yes, Joette?
So, is there a reason, aside from anti-Semitism, that the Jews were not allowed in all of the guilds?
No.
In some way, is it connected to the church?
But everyone but if all your members are Christian, Christianity is not a requirement to get in the guild, but if all your members are Christian and you come to them and say, okay, let's vote, should we let the Jews in? Oh, hell no. We don't want the Jews in with us. So it was definitely anti-Semitism, yes. The Jews were held in low esteem and then lower and lower and lower esteem as history moves on. Why? Because what happens during the Middle Ages is that the barons need more and more and more and more money to keep the fiefdoms going. And so they go to the Jews and say, you have to charge higher interest because I need more money. Well, at some point, it becomes untenable. And the Jews are really looked upon with scorn. And so this is how it goes, basically in Europe, for Jewish communities all throughout Christian Europe. And remember, some places were a little more tolerant, some places less tolerant. We can't make blanket statements, except I don't even think we can make blanket statements. Some places were bad, some places were really bad, some places were less bad, okay? All right. When we get to the Islamic world, very different story, completely different story. So the pact, as we talked earlier, the Pact of Umar sets out rules for the dhimmis. And basically, the Pact of Umar says things like, if you're a Jew, we'll tolerate you, but you have to rise in the presence of when Muslims enter the room. You can't be higher than a Muslim, meaning you can't ride a horse next to a Muslim who's walking. You can't rebuild your synagogues. Whatever they are, sorry. And they have to be very understated. You can't be out in the street doing Sukkot parades. Not okay. Whatever you do, you have to keep it very low key. You have to keep it quiet, keep it indoors, and not ostentatious. If you do that, fine, we'll let you go on and we'll tolerate you. We won't force you to convert to Islam. We won't persecute you. You just go on your daily life, pay your taxes. There was a special tax for dhimmis called the jizya. And it was a tax that you had to pay for not serving in the military. And we can say, okay, that's fine, except that Jews weren't allowed to serve in the military. So you had to pay a tax for something that you weren't allowed to do in the first place. And all dhimmis had to pay this tax, a jizya tax. But basically the Muslim ruler says, as long as you pay this tax, fine. Just go about your business. We don't want to know. We don't want to see you. Just do your thing. Christians fell under this label as well, and some Zoroastrians as well. Now, Zoroastrianism is a little bit tricky because there's a dark side and a light side to God. There's a good side and an evil side, and so does that mean there's two gods? Is it one with different aspects? It's a little tricky. But Muhammad was okay with Zoroastrians for the most part. Okay. So, as long as Jews kept to themselves, everything was fine. And we lived under this situation. Jews lived under this situation even in modern times. You know, early, before the state of Israel, just before the state of Israel was formed, we had a Jewish presence, right? There was always a Jewish presence in what is now Israel. Until in the early 1900s, it was a small contingent of Jews there, very studious scholars who were there. But then, as we know, at that time, come the Aliyot, right? We had many groups of Jews fleeing the assassination of Tsar Alexander the First in 1881 from Russia, and then Jews from Eastern Europe. And waves of Jews came to what we now call Israel, at that time Palestine, I guess. And if you are the Muslim majority in Israel, and you see these waves of Jews coming in, that's a problem, first of all, because the moment you lose your majority population status, you're in big trouble. And that was clearly on the minds of the Muslim rulers. It was also on the minds of the British, right? They had to acquiesce to the rulers, and they issued the White Paper in 1939, restricting Jewish immigration because they didn't want to upset the rulers. All right, so the other thing that was a huge problem is that these Jews were coming to Palestine saying, we're going to resettle our ancient homeland, we're going to do this, we're going to build bridges, we're going to build cities, and we're going to repopulate our ancient homeland. Now, if you're a Muslim ruler, and Jews are supposed to be acting like dhimmis, second-class citizens who keep quiet, the Muslim rulers are what? You're going to do what? No, you're not going to do that. This is our land. I'm sorry, you're not going to come in here and rebuild your homeland. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. Okay? Not cool. You are dhimmis. Act like it. Well, the settlers from Russia and Eastern Europe had no concept of dhimmis. They're like, oh, no, I don't think so. We're not doing that. So you can see immediately where the conflict. The large Jewish communities at this time are in Toledo, Spain, Granada, Spain, Seville, Spain, Constantinople, Turkey, Salonika in Greece, Baghdad, Cairo, and Jerusalem. And we know, I think you brought this up in the past, Rosie, by the mid-8th century. So if we're talking about the 8th century, what years are we talking about? Good, 7 to 799, good, is the 8th century. Okay, so in the middle of the 8th century, we have a very famous ruler in Spain who initiates what we call the Golden Age of Judaism in Spain. Anyone know his name? Abdul al-Rahman. And Abdul al-Rahman is the Sultan at the time, and he is very easygoing in terms of the Jews, and certainly in terms of enforcing any kind of dhimmi status. The Jews of Spain, yes? Correct, which were relaxed under Abdul al-Rahman. Very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. One of the rules under the Pact of Omar is that Jews had to dress a certain way, and they had to wear an insignia, identifying them as Jews. Thank you. That's absolutely correct. Abdul al-Rahman was much more lenient. And what he did was foster a relationship between Muslims and Jews, which was very important because the Muslims, who were to a great extent Arab, but not necessarily. So we can say that at the present time, most Arabs are Muslim. Some are Christian, right? We can say most Arabs are Muslim. We definitely cannot say all Muslims are Arabs, because we find Muslims everywhere in the world. The entire islands of Indonesia, everywhere. So we have to be very careful when we're talking about Muslims and Arabs, because it doesn't equate exactly. Exactly. The Iranians are not Arabs, they're Aryans. Very good.
So, Rabbi, it was my understanding that the leader of the Muslim group that went into Spain were actually Berbers.
Yes.
And so they do not identify as being Arab at all. I mean, a different mindset.
Yes, there were Arabs and Berbers. Yes, absolutely. Berbers, like you get the carpet, a Berber carpet. Yes? Okay, so Abdul al-Rahman relaxes the rules greatly for the Jews of Spain in his area. And what ends up happening is there's a great exchange of ideas. Because what did the Muslim world bring to us? Good? Good? Science, mathematics, medicine. Remember that Maimonides is living, right, under Islamic rule, and he's learning all kinds of things from Islam. Numbers, absolutely. Absolutely. All these things the Muslims brought to us, as well as philosophy. Philosophy did not exist in Jewish tradition. There was no Jewish philosophy until this comes up, and it's a result of what is called the Kalam school. The Kalam school in Muslim tradition, which comes out of Greek philosophy. And out of this comes Jewish philosophy. From the Kalam methods, especially beginning with Saadia Gaon, who was the father of Jewish philosophy. Okay, so we have Abdul al-Rahman, so now we have the world's Jews living under two systems here. And they're living under two very different systems. So the Jews of France and Europe are living under Christianity, being persecuted. The Jews of the Islamic world, Northern Africa and Spain. It depends on the region you were in. Some rulers enforced the Pact of Umar more strictly than other rulers. But in general, we can say that Jews living under Islam had an easier time than Jews living under Christian rulers. We have exceptions like the Almohads were a very strict sect, and they drive Maimonides out, right? Maimonides has to flee because it's convert or die. Maimonides flees, he goes into Morocco and then Egypt after that. All right, so the last little bit here is that ultimately Islam gets thrown out of Spain and Portugal. Does anyone know how that happens or what it's called? Beautiful. The Reconquista, the reconquering of Spain. And when does that happen? Good, good. So the Reconquista starts around 800 and it ends in 1492. Because who comes along in 1492? Ferdinand and Isabella, and they lead the Reconquista and reconquer the last parts of Spain. Following that, they bring in the Spanish Inquisition. Okay, very good. All right, so we are now done with the early Middle Ages. As I said, next week we're going to talk about the late Middle Ages, Crusades, the Middle Ages, the Crusades, and then the late Middle Ages. And then following that, we start with, let's go around the world and start looking at the Jewish communities of so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. But I thought it was really important that we have an understanding, how did Jews get to various parts of the world, and what did they experience when they got there? So we'll move into individual communities, not in 2 weeks, but in 3 weeks. And I'll see you back in 2 weeks. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone.
morning.
I apologize, but I have to leave early, so
Slam your thing down and be like, that's it, I'm out.
Right.
We can be a little bit. No, I'm not. I think Rabbi Brunon is officiating at.
The reason I asked.
Second. I have another. I have a different one. Yeah, I have a different. There's another.
We celebrated, a group of us from Lauderdale went to Bee's house for her 102nd birthday. It's not my.
I'm at 3 o'clock. I have the next one there. I have a different one at that was. So I'll see you there, but I'll be pulling in. You'll be pulling out.
You're right.
All right, folks. I'm going to pass out the. They're all. Yeah, it's 2 pages each, so it's 1, 2. Okay. I'll start over there. You start over here.
I can do some.
That's all right. There are 4 pages. It's double-sided. Lee Rome did. Get your program. Get your program. Here, I'll go one way. You go. You want one? Okay.
You're supposed to say, you can't tell your rabbis what a program.
That's right.
It's 2 pages, we need more over here.
All right, hold on. You want to give the rest?
It's 2 separate pages.
Yeah, it's 2 pages. The pages are double-sided.
Thank you.
And, all right, we're going to get there.
I think Gary gave one.
I gave Gary.
Everybody takes care of me.
Okay. Everyone have?
Except for me.
Oh, yeah. Please. One more.
Thank you.
All right.
Rabbi, which edition of English is this from?
This is the Steinsaltz translation.
Can I take one?
Sure.
Everybody have a copy?
Okay. All right. So first of all, good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. And it's nice to be here and studying together. And we'll make the bracha on the study of Torah. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And may our study today help us open our mind to some difficult concepts. I feel like this class has been, I sold you on the sex, and then it's been all downhill from there, right? It's been, and this is another bright topic. It must have been, woo, this one's tough. It's actually not so heavy, but maybe it is if we think about. I think the themes are. There's several motifs that sort of come to mind. putting your foot in your mouth. On one hand, that could be a theme. On the other hand, the theme could be ego. And then the other theme for sure is forgiveness. And so I want to think about all three of those, and I think we can all relate to all three of those potential topics. I think this text is either about putting your foot in your mouth or ego, and then it's certainly about forgiveness. So we can look at all three themes, but we've all put our foot in our mouths, right? Many, many times where we say things and you just, as it comes out, you're like, can't believe I did that, right? And then we also have those times when, for whatever reason, we think that we are better than. And when we think we're better than, how does that hurt us and how does that hurt people around us? And then finally, forgiveness. And when is it time to let something go? So these are themes that I think touch all of our experiences. Okay, so and then I'm going to read the text in one way, and then I'm going to switch to a different way based on another text. In other words, the text that you have, I looked up the rabbi who the text is about, and then I have a different take on it based on what I know about him from other places in the Gemara. Okay? So that's a little bit about what we're doing today. All right, so let's first try and read the text without an interpretive lens, but just let's try and read the text to read the text. Okay? This is from Ta'anit, and the tractate Ta'anit in the Talmud. Okay? So the rabbis are talking about, it's sort of silly. There's a whole lot of different discussions. The discussion that precedes this is whether, remember Bilam from the book of Numbers? And he both blesses and curses the Israelites, but when he blesses them, he says, may they be like cedars. Like cedar, like the cedar wood. Because, cedar, like in the Tanakh, it makes sense because the cedars of Lebanon. But the question the Gemara says is that really a backhanded compliment? In other words, is it really derisive and not a compliment? And so they say in the Talmud that it's better to be like a reed than it is to be like cedar. Okay, why do you think it would be better to be like a reed than to be like cedar? A reed has flexibility as opposed to a cedar, which is rigid. Now, they're going to end in a place that I just want to mention this before this text comes to kind of prove that. We'll see how it proves it and if it is effective at proving it. Is everything okay? You're everything? Okay. We can. What's that? The broomstick is made out of cedar. Okay. So the way the text ends is there's a machloket on whether or not, so cedar is definitely seen as inferior to reed. In fact, Sephardic communities write, when they're doing sofrut, the act of writing, they write with a reed quill. I don't know if a quill needs to be feathered by definition, but Ashkenazi sofrim write with a feather, and Sephardic sofrim write with a reed. And so a reed is considered like, wow, it's the tool that you write Torah with. It's a big deal. But maybe that it also is, for reasons mentioned before, that a cedar is firm and a reed is strong but flexible. So let's talk about that. So that's where they end up. So we're talking about reeds and cedars, okay? Tanu Rabbanan, Le'olam Hayeh Adam, I'm not going to read in the Hebrew, I'll just go, Rach. How many of you, all right, I'll just do the English. Okay, the sages taught, I'll go back and forth. The sages taught a praise about the reed, that a person should always be soft like a reed and should not be stiff like a cedar. Now here's an incident. So they give you an incident. Think about reeds and cedars and how it relates to this text. An incident occurred in which Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, this is the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and that's important because I'm going to bring that in later, came from Migdal Gedor. We don't know where that is. It's in the land of Israel somewhere. There's all these discussions about like where it could possibly be. I don't know. So, but he's definitely an Eretz Yisrael rabbi. He came from Migdal Gedor, from his rabbi's house, and he was riding on a donkey and strolling on the bank of the river. So he just gets out of class. He's had like a fulfilling, maybe it's a semester. Maybe he's not leaving just for the day, but it's leaving for he's leaving. So he's concluded the academic year. And he was riding on a donkey and strolling along the bank of the river, and he was very happy. And his head was swollen with pride because he had studied much Torah. He happened upon an exceedingly ugly person who said to him, "Greetings to you, my rabbi." But Rabbi Elazar did not return his greeting. Instead, Rabbi Elazar said to him, "Reka," I don't know if I want to translate as worthless person or empty person or empty, could also be someone empty of deeds. "How ugly is that man? Are all the people of your city as ugly as you?" The man said to him, "I do not know, but you should go and say to the craftsman who made me, 'How ugly is the vessel that you made?'" Ouch. What's he saying there? So what's going on? He's saying something better than that. He's like, "Oh yeah, wise guy." This is a very quick retort. Rabbi Elazar is coming back. He just finished his semester. He's a hot shot, he just went to yeshiva. He's coming back. He's on his horse. A guy passes him by and says, "Shalom," how are you? And he says, Reka, he says, Reka, worthless person, how ugly are you? Are all the people as ugly as you? And what does the man say without missing a beat? "I'm not sure, but maybe you should go and talk to the person who made me and see what he thinks about that." In other words, you pious rabbi, you're insulting me. Well, talk to God. So it's a very, that's a good zinger, right? Like my kids, they'd be like, "Ooh, got him, dude," that kind of thing. All right, good comeback. When Rabbi Elazar realized that he had sinned, and he descended from his donkey and prostrated. I actually want to not read and insulted this man merely on account of his appearance. I'm not actually, we could talk about that. I'm going to leave that out. But when he realized he sinned, he descended from his donkey and prostrated himself before him. And he said to the man, "I have sinned against you. Forgive me." The man said, "I will not forgive you until you go to the craftsman who made me and say, 'How ugly is the vessel you made?'" What did he just tell the guy to do? What did the man just tell Rabbi Elazar to do? No. He told him to go drop dead. "I'm not going to forgive you until you go to the person who created you and tell how ugly the vessel is. Go drop dead." Okay. Um, so he walked behind the man. So he's not giving up until they reached Rabbi Elazar's city. The people of city came out to greet him, saying, "Greetings to you, my rabbi, my master, my master." I don't know if it's Rabbi Elazar's city. I don't know why they put that in there. I think you could read it either way. But the man goes back to the city, and Rabbi Elazar follows him. The people of the city come out and greet him and say, "Greetings to you, my rabbi, my master, my master." The man, the one who got insulted, said to them, "Who are you calling my rabbi?" They said, "To this man who is walking behind you." He said to them, "If this is a rabbi, may there not be many like him among the Jewish people." See, he's not done. He's really angry. They asked him, "For what reason do you say this?" He said to them, "He did such and such to me." Wait, hold on. Oh, wait, hold on. Who kach v'kach asali. He did a little of this. You remember the Seinfeld? The yada yada? You know, they went, they paid for dinner, they went back to his apartment, and yada yada yada. Is this the yada 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 of the Talmud? Kach v'kach. Kach v'kach asali. He did this and that to me. What did this man say? Did he say just the insult? Did he also include the apology? It's not clear. So they said to him, "Even so, forgive him, as he's a great Torah scholar." He said to them, so now the insulted man says, "For your sakes," meaning for you, the people, "I'll forgive him, provided that he doesn't become accustomed to behaving like this." In other words, like if he knocks off that nonsense, I'll forgive him. Immediately, Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, entered the Beit Midrash. So there's it's a city, so there's a Beit Midrash there. Whether it's his or Beit Midrash is not clear. And then he teaches a person should always be soft like a reed, and he should not be stiff like a cedar. And therefore, the reed merited that a quilt is taken to it to write a Torah scroll, tefillin and mezuzahs. Okay, so we have here a insult. What are your initial reactions? Well, how about before we go to initial reactions, any clarifications? So not your opinion, but just a question of clarity that you're hoping to get from this text, and then we'll go to your reactions. Clarifications, go ahead.
So I have heard this story.
No, I'll repeat, don't worry about it. So I'll repeat the question. Yes, yeah, thank you, Susie.
I have heard this story before in relation to Yom Kippur and forgiveness, but I don't recall the reed and cedar part of it.
Yeah, the reed and cedar part, Joette asked, I don't recall, Joette said she's heard the story before, but she doesn't recall the reed and cedar. A lot of times that gets dropped. If you have 15 minutes to teach it, you're not going to include that part. But so
Definitely a Yom Kippur.
it's a very Yom Kippur story. So does Rabbi Elazar do any other clarifications? Who's the reed and who's the cedar? Right, so I think you flipped it then. You mean you just mean just the opposite way. Rabbi Elazar is the reed because he learned, so he's the reed, and the man is the cedar.
Well, the man did relent in that he said, if he learns, then he's forgiven. And he learned.
So maybe the man is the reed, the insulted man is the reed.
I think they both have a little of both in them.
Oh, they both have a little bit of both in them. Excellent. So that maybe they're both the reed and they're both the cedar. Okay. Other thoughts about this text?
Yeah, there is a bracha that one's supposed to say when he or she encounters an ugly person.
Right, and it's but sort of like the divine, right? Yeah.
So it does acknowledge that even though we're all made in the image of God and we're all God's creatures, there is some recognition of, I guess, the human condition that perceives something that isn't pleasant.
Right. Good. Good. Lana.
It's interesting to me that the rabbi embarrasses this one man,
Right.
not in front of anybody else, but the man proceeds to insult the rabbi who tried to beg for forgiveness and tried to make amends in front of everybody
Right.
in the community, and you're not supposed to embarrass people.
So Lana makes the point that the man gets the rabbi, Rabbi Elazar, insults the man in private. There's two people, and but then the insulted party, the insulted man, he does it publicly. He insults the rabbi publicly in front of the whole town. I mean, he's like, "This guy's a rabbi." You know, maybe there no Jew be like that. Right, Melinda.
The man says, I will forgive him if he doesn't do it again.
Oh, so maybe it's a story. So Melinda points out, but wait a second, Lana. This is a story about tshuva. So yeah, he may have aired it out, but he's actually saying he's going to forgive him.
He could have done that earlier when the guy prostrated himself.
So then Lana says, Melinda, be like a reed and listen to me. Okay, they're going back and forth here. I like this. It's getting heated in here. Woo! Lisa. Welcome to the Talmud. There is no conclusion, right? It's a very Talmudic way. Yeah, just. It seems to me that when the rabbi goes in the Beit Midrash, the way I'm interpreting it, and it's an interpretation, is that he is, like he starts his class and he says, class, I made a mistake today. That's the way I imagine it, that he said, we're going to learn about reeds and cedars and how, so let me tell you why be like a reed, and I'm trying to be like, he backs off immediately. He's a reed, the rabbi, in that he immediately apologizes. Once he realizes what he's done, he immediately apologizes. And so maybe he goes into the Beit Midrash and he owns it to the whole class and said, this is what happened. But that's my interpretation. Go ahead, Joanne.
If you look at the way that we approach Yom Kippur, the idea is if you are put in that, tshuva is effective if you are put in that situation again and do not repeat the mistake that you made the first time you were in that situation. So
Right.
if the rabbi is saying, be like a reed, not like a cedar, he understands the mistake that he made. Well, he understood it right away because he apologized. So the question is, if he's teaching this, then chances are he won't repeat that again.
Oh, good. So Joanne makes the point, look, pretty much almost every sermon that I give is my own personal therapy. It's true. You write sermons that you're thinking about and you're feeling, and you put it on paper, and maybe it's something you'll sink into your thick head, right? Like that's sort of all rabbis are like that, by the way. You write the sermons that you need to hear, and so maybe that's what's happening here. Maybe that he's teaching it because he needs to learn the lesson, and the best way to learn is to teach. Good point, Peter.
Just to counter this view, it would seem that Rabbi Elazar's first misstep is that he is so filled with smugness.
Yes.
What a great scholar I am, and this and that, that he does it, that he thinks that it excuses his behavior and isn't even, as we would say, mindful of it. So later on, if in fact that's the view, he said, so be more like a thief like me, because you see how bountiful I am. He's still doing the same thing. Oh, look at me. You know,
Right. Peter makes a good point. Right. Right. He uses himself as a proof text for personal growth. Peter's point is actually a very good one. Like, it doesn't seem like maybe it shows that he's able to apologize, but he certainly doesn't win humility because in some ways you're like, oh, like it's pretty laudable that he admits his mistake to the Beit Midrash and tells over this embarrassing story of how he acted like a total jerk. But on the other hand, he uses his misstep and his subsequent apology as a proof text for how someone should be like a reed. So he's almost like singing his own virtues. And so Peter's like, wait a second, that's not so virtuous, right? I mean, humility is not his, right? And you get a feeling from Rabbi Elazar that he's very prideful. I mean, it said so. The text said ga'ah, like earlier up in the text, like he's riding back after the semester at college, and the Beit Midrash, he learned a lot of Gemara, and and it's actually interesting. He's on the horse, he's up. Did it say horse? A donkey, good. Okay, yeah, they didn't write horses.
You're on a donkey, because I've ridden one. Your feet actually almost can touch the ground, so you're not very high.
You're still higher.
A little bit higher.
I think the donkey, I think it's symbolic here. I think the text wants you to say, he is elevated, and the guy is not, there's this kind of thing. And then he flips it. It starts like this. It starts with the rabbi and the man, and then it flips. He prostrates himself. So he goes, but then Peter's question is a good one. Does he ever really go that, like maybe it's ego that's his biggest issue. Because then he goes down and he does say he's sorry, but he goes into the Beit Midrash and goes, I'm going to tell you why you should be like a cedar. And then he self-congratulates himself for being so apologetic.
actually, the rabbis focused a lot on the tremendous sin of pride.
Yeah.
Attributing chumash to that is puffing yourself up in pride, and that's what divides people.
Good. So I'm going to use this as a segue. Peter says that the rabbis spend a lot of time about pride. And I'm going to say I think this text is actually mostly about pride. And for me, I did a little bit of thought. I was thinking about this text after I studied it. At first, I just thought it was like a fun text to bring you. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, the comment, unless the text is more about pride than we think. Not even the second half about pride, from the beginning. I don't think he curses this man based on his body, by how ugly he is physically. I think what happens, Bridget, you're supposed to slam down your papers. That's it, I'm out. That's it, thank you. Okay. I think the text is about, there's several things that don't make sense to me. The way he insults the man, I think the text is saying something. I think it's easy to read this text. Oh, he calls him ugly. And then he apologizes, and then he pats himself on the back for apologizing. But why does he call him ugly?
That's what I was thinking. It's like,
Who says that? Right, like, come on. Like, does anyone talk like that for real? No, we've all said incredibly stupid things. I can probably make a list just from like the past, week of like dumb after dumb. And, we can all do that. But this seems a little bit, the guy, can you imagine saying something? The guy is passing him on the pathway and, good morning, Rabbi. And he says, boy, you're ugly. That seems like, that just doesn't seem, so I think something else is going on here. Well, go ahead, Susie, you want to argue with me?
I'm not arguing, I just thought that maybe something happened before, because as you said, nobody goes and serves at Shalom.
Yeah. So it could be, right, so one way of reading this, Susie's right. You can say, Susie's like, Rabbi, you're wrong. I'm just trying to beef it up here, give it a little drama. Rabbi, you don't know what you're talking about. He's annoyed because this guy, he's thinking about all the Torah that he learned. He's sort of on spiritual cloud nine. And this yuckle over here, like, bothers him. And so he's ticked off. And then he looks at him, ugh, you're ugly, You could make that argument, but then it's still about the physical appearance, and who says that? So I think it's something else that happens here. I think he's looking down at him, that he's saying, this is why I didn't like some of the interpretation here. I think it's more about when he says, let's go back in the text. Hold on. When he says Reka, and here they translate Reka as worthless person, I think it means empty person. Like rake in the Hebrew language means empty. So this is what I think is happening. I think that Rabbi Elazar is studying in the yeshiva for the semester, for the year, for the period of time. And he comes and he's still thinking about it on his horse. And when he comes across, and this guy bothers him, and he's jostled back to the real world. And he looks to this guy and he calls him, you empty vessel. You're so ugly. I think he means you've got no Torah. I'm religiously superior to you. You're such a commoner. I think it's a class, I think there's a class, or there's a holier than thou that I think that's going on here. Hold on for 1 second, Melinda. I think what's happening here, it's not that Rabbi Elazar, it's actually something far more offensive. He didn't call him ugly. He called himself better than the other guy. He called the guy worthless because he believes that what he was doing, you're rake, you empty vessel, you're so ugly. Because in the rabbinic literature, your insides match your outsides. So I think he's saying, you're worthless. I think that I'm superior because I just studied all this Torah. That's why I think is going on, and I'm going to get to your comments in a second. And here's why I think that's going on. Because I looked up Rabbi Elazar, because I wanted to know, when he said he was the son of Rabbi Shimon, I wanted to know, is it Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? And it is. So here's Rabbi Elazar in another place in the Talmud. This is when he's a little boy chick. Okay, let me read this story. Some of you are going to be familiar with this story. Again, this is why I think Rabbi Elazar is doing what he's doing is before it was a story about someone insulting. I'm going to make my clear distinction. The first way we read it, it's a story about someone making an insult, about someone's appearance, the rabbi being apologetic, the other person, the insulted party, not being particularly forgiving, ultimately begrudgingly forgives, and the rabbi saying, hey, I congratulate myself, I'm like a reed because I realized I was wrong, and that guy is like a cedar because he won't admit that he should just kind of like let bygones be bygones. But now we're moving to a different way of saying that the story is about a man who thinks he is holier than thou, a man who thinks he's better, a man who thinks he has a better connection to God, a man who thinks that his way is the right way and all of these other people are worthless, and then needs to be but only when the commoner makes that retort and answers his claim of religious superiority, answers it with a religious argument. In other words, if Rabbi Elazar is looking down on the man and says, "You're so empty, I'm so much holier than you," and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, I'm so empty, why don't you talk to God who made me?" So his retort is it's couched now in religious language. He's fighting fire with fire. Rabbi Elazar makes a claim of religious superiority, and the insulted, aggrieved party says, "Wait a second, no, I can bring you down in religious terms." And then what Rabbi Elazar does, then that kind of like jostles Rabbi Elazar, and he asks for forgiveness because he realizes that this man has worth. And here's why I think Rabbi Elazar does that, because Rabbi Elazar has a history of this type of behavior. And here's the other story. It's when he's a little boy. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, does anyone know anything about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is one of the early rabbis, and he publicly condemned the Romans, the Roman rule. Okay, this is and so he condemns the Romans, and the Romans hear about this, and they sentence him to he's a wanted man, and so Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai goes with his son on the run, and they hide in a cave. Here's the story about that. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, this is so after all the different rabbis who did different things with the Romans, and they were denounced that they should be killed. Okay, so here he's denounced. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai hears this, and his son Rabbi Elazar, from our story, but this is when he's a boy, and hides in the study hall. So it's getting hot out on the street, we'll hide in the study hall. Every day, Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring them bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. When the decree intensified, some more policemen looking for him, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, Rabbi Elazar, "Women are easily impressionable. Lest the authorities torture her and she reveal her whereabouts, let's go hide in a cave." So he's in it's like misogyny 101. He's in the Beit Midrash. He goes, "Those women, she's going to break. So we can't hide in the Beit Midrash anymore. Let's get out of here because she's gonna cave and tell the authorities where we are." A miracle occurred, so they go hide in a cave. A miracle occurred, and a carob tree was created for them, as well as a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and sit covered in sand up to their necks. They would study Torah all day in that manner. So like in the hot Judean sun, they were in the caves. So what do? Instead of sunscreen, they bury themselves in the sand so they don't get sunstroke, and they study Torah with one another while they're buried up to their heads. At the prayer time, they would dress, they would cover themselves and pray, and then again they would remove their clothes afterwards so they would not become tattered. They sat in the cave for 12 years. Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance to the cave and said, "Who will inform Bar Yochai that the emperor died and his decree has been abrogated?" Elijah shows up in a lot in the Talmud stories, like when there's you need a message or like a message delivered. So Elijah comes and goes, "All right, who's going to tell Shimon Bar Yochai, you can come out now?" It's like when the kids keep playing Marco Polo in the pool, but we're done, game's over, you can come out. They emerged from the cave and saw people who were, they've been studying Torah buried up until, all they've done every day for 12 years is bury themselves in sand, study the Torah, get out, pray, take the, clean the clothes, go back in, back and forth with the carob tree for 12 years. They've come across no one and nothing else. All they've seen, all they've done is studied and prayed for 12 years. Sort of similar to the guy who felt really good about his semester learning when he's older. So so they come out of the cave. Same thing as Rabbi Elazar before. He emerged in our story, the one that we studied earlier. He emerges from the study and has to encounter somebody. He's on a donkey, he's higher up, and the guy says, "Hey, Shalom, Rabbi," and then he insults him. He's encountering the real world in our story, and now as a young boy, he comes out of the cave after 12 years, and he has to encounter the real world for the first time. And something similar happens. They emerged from the cave and saw people who were plowing and sowing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "These people abandon eternal life of Torah study and engage in temporal life for their own sustenance?" In other words, he looks at them, he goes, "Ugh, these people. This is how you and I, Boychik, Rabbi Elazar, we studied every day for 12 years. That's all we did. And these guys are like plowing the fields. Ugh, what commoners." And every place that Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar directed their eyes was immediately burned. Now, are we to take the Gemara literally, or is it, who knows? A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? Return to your cave. What are you doing? Go back in your cave." They again went and sat there for 12 months. Then this is a cute little argument. They said, "The judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. Surely their sin was atoned in that time." So a divine voice emerged and said to them, "Okay, you can come out of your cave." In other words, they were like, you only say Kaddish. You say Kaddish for a deceased person for a full year. Why? So their soul is elevated. That we believe that the soul is sort of like in limbo, right? It's Gehenna. It's sort of like, it's not purgatory, but it's kind of like, anyway, it's in the middle. And so it's 12 months. So they're like, wait a second. They get sent back into the cave. And their argument to get out of the cave is, look, someone only stays in Gehenna for 12 months, so we've been in the cave for 12 months, we should be able to get out. And that's a good argument for God, and God says, okay, you can come out of your cave. They emerged. Everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, "My son, you and I suffice for the entire world, as the two of us are engaged in the proper study of Torah." And that's how the story ends. It's interesting. At the end, did anyone catch what happened at the end? They come out of the cave. What happens when they come out of the cave? That's the first time. They don't like what they see and they burn them with contempt. And they go back in the cave for 12 months. They come back out of the cave. What happened when they came back out of the cave? It seems like the sun is still burning stuff. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he fixes things. But the text says, they emerged from the cave after 12 months. So 12 years plus 12 months. They've been there for 13 years now. They were out once before. They burned everything. Both of them burned it. Then they go back in the cave, 12 months. They come out. It says here, Rabbi Elazar, everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would heal. Rabbi Elazar is still filled with the contempt. Rabbi Elazar is still like, to the world. Psh. Jewish lasers, right, Jewish lasers, yes. Marjorie Taylor Greene in the Talmud. It's very informed. I can't, like, Marjorie, oh God help us. Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's like, anyway. So what's interesting here is it doesn't seem that Rabbi Elazar has learned anything. Hold on one second, Lana. Then we go back to our text. It's the same Rabbi Elazar, but later in life. And so based on what I read with his father, I see the text as something completely different. So now, Rabbi Elazar is coming out of yeshiva, similar to the way he came out of the cave. And he burns with his words. Because just, again, he's not learned anything. He looks down on these people and he says, you empty person. You're like the first guy that we saw with the plow and I have such disdain for your uneducated, lack of spirituality, lack of Torah, holier than thou, I'm better than you. He does it again. But this time, something different happens. The retort from the man is, oh, you think I'm so worthless? Why don't you explain that to God, my creator? And finally, after all of these years, he learns. Got it. Oh, he thought he was holier than thou, and he needed a religious argument to kind of dissuade him of the notion that he was holier than thou. He was so holier than thou, the only thing that would dissuade him of his sense of religious superiority was a religious argument. And this common guy makes it. But then the common guy doesn't let up and keeps on giving it to him and saying, no, if all rabbis are like that, may there not be a rabbi like that. No rabbis for. So there's a superiority argument here, like this text with Rabbi Elazar when he's older seems to be an anti-rabbi polemic. Like, we don't need rabbis like that. If that's how you guys are going to behave, we don't need that. But then Rabbi Elazar, and that's because it's the rabbis who write it, ultimately does, not only apologize, but seems to use his own missteps, maybe for his whole life, as a proof text. So there's I'm going to conclude and then I'll take some comments. 2 ways of reading the text. The first way is read the text simply. It's an insult. Guy put his foot in his mouth and he apologized. The other guy didn't accept his apology. It's a perfectly legitimate way of reading the text. It's probably the pshat of the text. But I think there's a deeper level of the text. I think it's a text about someone who's always looked at other people with a sense of holier than thou, with a sense of superiority, with a sense of that he was a better person, and that he was only, even with his father it happened, his father learned his lesson after 12 years in the cave, and then another 12 months, and his father, Shimon Bar Yochai, learns his lesson. The kid didn't learn the lesson yet, and was still burning stuff. He goes then and goes to yeshiva. He comes out of yeshiva. He finally learns the lesson when the guy who's aggrieved by him makes a religious argument. And then he realizes, his eyes open, and he says, wait a second, being religious is being humble. And then he really gets humble. Until he doesn't, when he self-congratulates himself again. So that is this text, and the way I read it in 2 different ways. I hope that you enjoyed learning that. And now any comments? So 1, 2, 3.
In light of the second story, I see Rabbi Elazar as the cedar in this case because he hasn't changed. And the nature of cedar is that it doesn't change. He would use its life clauses
Right.
because of its durability.
Right. So he said, like, I think what Joette said, earlier, like he's both the cedar and maybe he's not even talking about the agree. Maybe when he's saying you're like cedar or reed, maybe he's like, I've been cedar or I'm more inclined to be cedar and now I'm reed. Like he's been cedar his whole life. The trick, his whole playbook for his whole life was,
Learned it at all because of the way he, going to teach the lesson. It's
yeah.
still a whole year.
Right. So he even then says, oh, I finally learned the lesson. But then the person in the front of the room is like, oh, I'm not so sure you really did. Right. Good. So maybe he makes a lesson about cedar and thinks, I'm finally not cedar, but then pats himself on the back, which shows he's still cedar. Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll bring a happy text next time. It's terrible. All right.
So here's the question, if the other guy wouldn't have followed him back to the town and shamed him in front of everyone and talked about it and said, hey, look what you did, would Rabbi Elazar have gone to the Bet Midrash and made his peace and all, or would he have just said, okay, well, that happened, okay.
All right, Zegazunt. It's a great question. What do you think? Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. The question was, what happened if the guy didn't go back to the town? Would Rabbi Elazar have been as forthcoming with his sort of, he realized that would he have gone in and told the whole community, he goes into the Beit Midrash, that's his place. And he goes into his place and admits that he did something wrong. Would have he done that if the town, like if he just went home, if they parted ways on the road? Would have he gone back home and said, would he have gone home and still gone to the Beit Midrash and said it? Not clear. Okay, Melinda.
My concern or whatever, was this common or really just a man on the street? Or could it have been like you mentioned the lawn where the donkey saw an angel and nobody else saw him? Was maybe this guy planted there so that Elazar could change his ways enough to insult him to become a man?
You're very mystical. I love it. You could certainly, you can make the argument. It says here Adam echad haya, and it's mechoar beyoter. It says he's a man, but the truth is, I like one of my sermons I like giving or teachings I like giving is that everyone's an angel. So Melinda said is the person who's in the text may be an angel.
Or just another rabbi who just happened to be
Right. He's not another rabbi.
somebody else.
I stay on your angel part, or like a mystical, that's like a Kabbalistic reading. So it only says Adam. So it's the text, look, it's a story. So his identity is intentionally obscured because his identity is obscure, the aggrieved party, the aggrieved man, because we've all been, I think there's a reason. The reason is that all of us can be that man, where someone has said something about us, and we can't let it go. We can't let it go. Yeah, but at what point, so my kids are, their grandparents are on, but my kids are like this. They have such, maybe this is like teenagers, they have such a firm sense of justice. Everything needs to be adjudicated to the nth degree. And it's like, okay, you can be right and be wrong. Right, and maybe, right, okay, give it up. And so when does this man has such an intense sense of justice that he's in, so I think the reason that the man is anonymous is that because so many of us will go hold on to it. And I gotta say, it's easier for me to say this as the rabbi than as a person. As thinking about the people who come into my office, it's easier to say, oh my gosh, they're so weighed down by the pain that other people have put on them. They don't their lives would be better if they just walked away from it. That being said, as a human being, also I know it's easier said than done. We all are in that place where, like you imagine, the pain that was caused to you, and you it still lives inside of you, and that's expensive real estate. It takes up a lot of space in your soul, and that's why I think the man is anonymous, because we can all see ourselves in that position. Now, you could also make the argument, I'm going to go a different way, that he's anonymous because in the Bible, at least, when there's an anonymous person, that person could be an angel, like in the story of Joseph, who's going to meet his brothers in Dothan, I think it is, and there's a guy he encounters on the road, and it's like 4 or 5 psukim in the Torah, and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, your brothers left, they went that way." And why was the Torah included, like the guy stopping at the gas station for directions? And so it's because everyone could be an angel who puts someone back on the right path. That's what the rabbis say. All right, Rosalie, go ahead. Ooh, use the mic.
My question, maybe it's more of a comment, is whether a rabbi should be above everyone else in terms of being a paragon of virtue as opposed to being a common man and reacting like a common man. Should he be above all that?
So I think this text is playing with that. And I think it's about not just a rabbi saying something stupid, because rabbis say stupid things all the time. Take it from me, I know. But I think it's actually about something more important, which is, we're not holier than anyone. And then maybe this is a text that's trying to remind, it's written by rabbis. Why was this text written? Was it written to remind rabbis not to think of themselves as above? But then, Peter and Lana, by the end, maybe they still haven't learned that lesson, because they're still using themselves as a proof text for a good thing. And so they still think of themselves a little too highly. Peter, go ahead.
Actually, by then, to the comment, at that time, rabbis could not charge for teaching Torah, so each of them had to have a trade of livelihood.
Right.
People saw their rabbis, stores,
Right. Yeah.
just day laborers, carpenters.
Yeah, unlike in the state of Israel, where they get a government handout, which just doubled. So you want to talk about the new coalition? It just doubled. The state handout. So now you study Torah all the time in the state of Israel. You earn about the same, maybe even a little bit more than a non-combat soldier. Okay. So, but there was no rabbinic this idea of learning without a profession, right? The rabbis were the rabbis, and what's interesting is the rabbis emerged from the Pharisees, who are very decidedly middle class, like they're the working class people. They're not like the Sadducees, who are sort of. But maybe this text is a reminder still. Okay, you think like in your Beit Midrash you're so holy. So, because what does Shimon Bar Yochai and Elazar do? And they create a Beit Midrash. Every time someone goes into the Beit Midrash and they're on their own world of spirituality, and they're not, shoveling things and tending to things and doing things, they start to think of themselves pretty highly. And maybe this text is a polemic against that. Okay, I'm going to pause here for the day because I have to go meet with a family. But I thought this was an interesting text, and I kind of like doing the little curveball in the middle of it. So I thought that was sort of fun with the bringing in the other text of Rabbi Elazar. So I hope that you enjoyed this text. Take this text with you, and feel free to. There's study questions and the like, and feel free to share it with a friend.
Yeah, just a reminder. Hello. We're off next week. So for those of you who just came in for the second session, and Rabbi, no session next week because of the Thanksgiving holiday.
We don't want you to show
We
up.
don't want you to show up and nobody being here, or a handful of us being here. That's a good question.
That's right. All right, have a good day, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Have a great day, everyone.
You know what? Ben, could I abandon her? You know what? I'm gonna just say this. I have a friend. I know this is hard to believe, one that I have a friend. My friend who sometimes gets obnoxious, okay? I mean, really sincerely obnoxious. He's using something obnoxious with no wife, okay? And I had to, about 2 years ago, I've gotten really hard on him, really hard.
Like on stage. Okay, so, see you next week. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Hope Jack feels better. And, see you the weekend. Okay?
I read that last one you said, that was great. Oh, no way, it's a wonderful thing. Today,
I really had to come
I
on here.
posted the one about the baby.
That's not what I want to be.
Did you read that?
I didn't hear that. Love that. Okay. Happy Thanksgiving. It's 1 week ahead of time.
Take it.
We have a annual program tomorrow night. It's at an interfaith church that rotates with the synagogue. It's like 25 years old. My wife and I have been rotate around, you know, and about every 6, 7 years we go to the Dario.
I grew up that way. We had a synagogue where I grew up, East Methodist Church, and every Thanksgiving we had services with them. We'd be at the church, we'd at the synagogue, the church, the synagogue. And they did some remodeling, so we had the synagogue a couple of years, and synagogue was, it was just constant back and forth. The camaraderie,
Beautiful service.
the camaraderie is just amazing with the two with the church and the synagogue, but they don't do it anymore now.
So you can substitute this tomorrow night?
We might walk down there, yeah.
Huh?
We might walk down there too.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna drive down there. Forget it.
You live near there?
Yeah.
5 minutes away from there.
We're about 10-minute walk if it's that far.
Okay, that's cool.
Well, if we walk fast, we can walk.
The interfaith service tomorrow.
Oh, that's nice.